Welcome to Facebook Live. I'm Rafael Sanchez in the WRTV6 newsroom. We're talking about the Bob Leonard Jr. case in Fort Wayne, which just wrapped up after just a less than 30-minute defense. We wanted to talk about what's happening in Fort Wayne right now, what we can expect next in this case. As you may recall, the Richmond Hill explosion back from November 2012. Nearly 4 years later, Bob Leonard Jr. his case went before jury in Fort Wayne, and after only 17 days, this case has wrapped up. His brother Mark Ray Leonard was convicted last July on similar criminal charges. He is now facing 2 life sentences without parole, plus an additional 75 years. That jury came back after just about less than 4 hours. So this case, what's next in this case involving Bob Leonard Jr. and the Richmond Hill explosion? Well, this case will now go to the jury on Tuesday. I'm going to presume around 9 or 10 o'clock. They will get the closing arguments where both the prosecution and the defense will make their arguments as to why they believe, A, the prosecution, that he should go to jail for the rest of his life, or the defense, who will try to create some doubt. The defense will say that this is not the guy. And so those arguments will happen on Tuesday morning. Then the jury will get instructions. Those instructions could be as long as 75 to 80 pages of things that the jury must consider. Again, a jury of 16. There were 6 alternates, 12 on the jury, 6 alternates on this jury. So the jury of 18, I should say, excuse me, was on this jury. They had 6 alternates to make sure that if anyone got sick or passed out, that they would have enough people to listen to this case. They will then get the instructions, and they will get to the case by Tuesday afternoon. So it's possible that we may have a verdict in the case against Bob Leonard Jr. as early as Tuesday afternoon, or it could go into Wednesday. I say Tuesday afternoon possibly because, again, when it came to Mark Ray Leonard, and he faced the same criminal charges, more than 50 counts, that jury came back in less than 4 hours. And as I sort of compared it to, the jury came back faster than the running of the Indianapolis 500 last year. So, again, a lot of information came in this case. Many of you have been asking us on Facebook, what's next? Well, after the Bob Leonard case is over sometime next week, as early as Tuesday or Wednesday, there are still 2 other men who are facing criminal charges in this case. You may recall that one of the key prosecution witnesses is Monserrate Shirley. It was her home at 8349 Field Fairway that exploded back on November the 10th, 2012 at 11:11, and she cut a deal with the prosecution. And in that deal, she said that she would give up information in an effort not to face life in prison without parole. So she's been singing like a canary, and based on her information, they were able to then arrest 2 additional people back in 2015, that being Gary Thompson in January and then Glenn Holtz in April. So Gary Thompson is still in custody, Glenn Holtz is not in custody, but both of those men are also now facing criminal charges in connection to the Richmond Hill case. So their trials will then begin sometime later this fall, or maybe even next year. Now, according to the Marion County prosecutor, Terry Curry, I'm told that the prosecution team would need 3 to 6 months to sort of get it together, put all the pieces back together, and then go back out and have the trial. So we're looking possibly at a trial for Gary Thompson sometime maybe September or October, depending on the scheduling. I was also told that the case involving Gary Holtz would not require as much trial time. So it's possible that all the Richmond Hill cases could be come to an end, if not by the end of this year, then of course then by 2017. It has been a long and arduous situation, not only for the prosecution team, but as you can also imagine, for the people of Richmond Hill who had to endure not only losing 2 neighbors, Dion and Jennifer Longworth, to the explosion, but as you may recall, there was more than $5 million of damage. More than 30 homes had to be either demolished in some capacity. Many homes had to be replaced. So the folks in Richmond Hill really, they've tried to deal with this as best as possible. As I've interviewed them throughout the years, many of them are just trying to look forward. They are keeping a close eye as to what's happening in South Bend. In fact, a number of the homeowners did attend this trial for the past 17 days, so they're very mindful of what's going on. As I speak to some of these folks, just good people, not seeking revenge, but obviously seeking justice for what happened in their neighborhood. Some questions, John Carr, you're asking, what will it cost us taxpayers to house them? It will cost, I don't have the exact figure, but it will cost, I imagine, between 40 to 50,000, or I'll have to get the exact figure for you. If you're talking about the trial costs about 60,000 up in South Bend. Carl, I'll get that information for you. John is asking what will it cost taxpayers to house them in jail. I don't know the exact figure to that. I'll have to call DOC to get that figure, but it will not cost any more than any other regular inmate currently in the system. Cynthia McVeigh asking us, need to all the time. What are you asking me, Cynthia? You're asking, this is News Channel RTV, very up to date, need all the time, and correct too. Well, thank you, Cynthia, for those comments. We really wanted to talk though about what's next in this case, because obviously people just, this happened back in 2012, and many people have been asking questions about when will this all be over. And so I think sort of we're seeing it come to that point. It is also possible, according to the prosecutor, that we could get a plea deal. So based on what happens with Bob Leonard Jr., either on Tuesday or Wednesday, and I'm going to guess it's going to happen by Tuesday or Wednesday, because in the last case, the verdict came in just less than 4 hours. We'll see how this will trigger and what the lawyers with Gary Thompson and Glenn Holtz will want to do, and what information they may have to bring this to an end. Justin Briggs, this guy has done a great job for a long time. You're very kind, Justin. I thought that was a question. But the prosecution team may wrap this all up this year if they can get a plea deal. It's possible that the case involving Glenn Thompson and Gary Holtz will come to that, but it's also possible that the prosecutor mentioned to me, Terry Curry, that they would be ready to move forward with a criminal case against the remaining 2 men if necessary. For those of you joining us now on Facebook Live, it's about 10:35 on Friday. We're talking about what's happening in Fort Wayne. Bob Leonard Jr., who is the second suspect to go on trial in the Southside explosion, which was felt in 2012 from more than 5 miles throughout central Indiana. That second suspect, Bob Leonard Jr., his defense team has wrapped up its case after just under 30 minutes. When it came to his brother, Markley Leonard, his case wrapped up under over 40 minutes. It was not a long case in South Bend. They only presented 2 witnesses. Michael Leaf is asking, why was it that the first case took such a short time and this one has taken longer? Well, Michael, that's not the case. In the Mark Ray Leonard case, we went to court for 20 days. And that case went even longer, Michael, because the defense team for Mark Ray Leonard called for several mistrials. Before we even got to the mistrials, there were a number of issues with jury selection. In fact, the jury selection involving Mark Ray Leonard took much longer than anticipated. So this case has been much faster. The prosecution team telling us that, every case is different, but they were able to get traction in this case, and so this case will end 3 days earlier than the case in South Bend. So this case will be much faster than the case involving Mark Ray Leonard. And of course, the next outlook is what will happen with Gary Thompson and Glenn Holtz. But as Tammy Cooper now asking, what deal is Miss Shirley going to get by telling what she knows? Well, here's the deal with Monserrate Shirley. She cut that deal, right? So the deal, she could get a maximum, Tammy, of 50 years in prison. She's 50 years old now, so basically she could die in state custody. That's the possibility. The minimum is 20, the advisory is 30. So between 20 and 50 years for cutting a deal with the prosecution team. Now, as part of her deal, she will not get life in prison without parole, but she also could get no jail time. You heard me right. She could get no jail time because of the evidence, because of the testimony that she is providing, not only in the first trial, which led to a conviction, the testimony which she provided in the second trial. In fact, she testified on day 13 of this case against Bob Leonard Jr., and more than likely she will testify against Gary Thompson and Glenn Holtz, and it was her proffer, her statements that really led to the other arrests. Had she not cut a deal, there would not have been an arrest of suspects number 4 and 5. So possibly, so to answer your question more directly, she could face 0 time in jail, up to 50. More than likely, she'll get between 20 and 30. That case will be determined at the conclusion of all the trials, and Monserrate Shirley's case will be held, not trial, but her her sentencing will be held here in Indianapolis. So the judge in this case, Judge Carlisle, who had all the cases originally, will be the judge that will impose that sentence. Now, Judge Carlisle had all the cases before her, but because of all the pre-trial publicity that happened in Indianapolis, the defense attorneys for those gentlemen, believing that they would get a fairer trial, Mark Ray Leonard's case was moved to 3 hours away to St. Joseph's County in South Bend, and then Bob Leonard Jr.'s case was moved to Allen County in Fort Wayne, 2.5 hours away from the Richmond Hill subdivision. Interestingly enough, though, during jury selection, when both legal teams would say, "Have you heard about Richmond Hill? Have you heard about the Southside explosion?" those juries would all say yes. The potential jurors would say, "Yes, I heard something." But when they would ask more specifics about the details, those jurors did not have the details, so they were able to get more, they were able to find jurors who at least were open to hearing from more than 150 witnesses, thousands of pages of evidence, and tons of videos and 911 calls. Let me keep answering questions here. Nakia Perry, my son was in Jennifer's class that year, and the kids were devastated. And so Nakia Perry is talking about Jennifer Longworth, a loved second grade teacher in the Greenwood Public School System. Her husband Dion, they both lived next door to the home that exploded. They were a wonderful couple by all means. They loved sunflowers, they loved the Colts, they were dedicated to their professions. Dion was an electronics whiz. He was a gardening whiz. He loved being out with his sunflowers. Mrs. Longworth was an amazing teacher, not only respected by her peers in the second grade, but all her peers in her elementary school. In fact, one of the neatest things that happened after that, Mrs. Longworth was known for knitting stuff for her kids for Christmas, and those teachers were able to carry on that tradition to remember Jennifer Longworth. So that was an amazing way to remember her legacy, not only for being a great teacher, but also being a good human being. Jesse Carson, will the court case be in Indianapolis? Well, Jesse, the court case involving Monserrate Shirley, when she's done testifying against all the other suspects, her sentencing will happen in Indianapolis. It is more likely that Gary Thompson's criminal case, should that go forward after this criminal case, that will also be held in Indianapolis, because his case did not have as much pre-trial publicity. He has not been the focus. He has not been, at this point, the focus of intense media scrutiny as Monserrate Shirley and Mark Ray Leonard, her then boyfriend, and Bob Leonard. As you may recall, days after the explosion, we all thought that this was an issue of a natural gas incident, which it was not. There was also the allegation that maybe a plane had crashed into that neighborhood because the Greenwood Municipal Airport is nearby. That was not the case. And then these folks went on television claiming that they had nothing to do with it, they had nothing, that they were not aware of what happened. And so they got a lot of the media attention. So Gary Thompson does not have that attention, so more than likely his case will be held here. But if not here, we have already traveled almost every corner of the state. We've been to St. Joseph County, we've been to Allen County, we have yet to go to the southwestern or the southeastern parts of the state. So I would imagine if pretrial publicity is an issue for Gary Thompson or Glenn Hulse, that those cases will be moved to those jurisdictions so that those men can get a fair trial. We want to thank you for joining us on Facebook Live. We're talking about Bob Leonard Jr., the defense in his case, arrested after just 29 minutes at about 9:30 this morning. And so we're talking about what's next in the Richmond Hill cases following today's action. Lindsey Camden, I missed the beginning as well, and I think I just repeated while we're talking about giving you an insight as to what's going to happen next. And I apologize if I repeat myself, but I'm reading your messages as they come in. So Carrie Martin Ferguson writes that Jennifer was a sorority sister of mine at Ball State. She was so kind and sweet and such a great person. Right on. She was all those things. And obviously, as I've spoken to John Longworth and Don Buxton and the individual families, you know, these cases are not about, these cases really can't bring back their kids that they love, you know, so all they can hold on to is the fact that someone is being held accountable for a misdeed. As you recall, this was all about greed. It was all about that $300,000 insurance policy that these folks allegedly concocted a plan to what they said was going to be a small fire. We kept hearing that over and over in the courtroom. This was meant to be a small fire that was supposed to allow them to collect over $304,000 on a State Farm insurance policy. Well, they tried this over a 3-week period. 2 times it failed, and of course, by the time of November the 10th, we saw the explosion. And so, you know, it was very difficult to hear that in court when they would refer to this as a small fire, when we lost two good individuals and so many other people were hurt in the wake of it. As you can imagine, there were many injuries, and since then there have been a lot of counseling and a lot of family breakup because of this. So this has had, you know, a very long-term effect on that neighborhood. John Carr says, save the money to jail them and put them on the roads. Lethal injections ×5. Well, that is not an option in this case, John, so I understand your sentiment. In this case, more than likely, Bob Leonard Jr. will get life in prison without parole, so he will die in state custody. Charlie Riff asks, what will happen to those who were affected by the inhumane act? Well, many of them, Charlie, they're some of the best people on earth. These are the people you want to be your neighbors. These are the people that on the night of the explosion, we're talking about those who survived it, really on that night, instead of running away, they were going door to door, trying to find their neighbors. Some rebuilt because they loved their neighbors, and so they stayed in Richmond Hill. Some were just unable to cope with being in, because initially the home was still there. I mean, the home was not demolished. The home that exploded was not demolished for another year and a half after the event. So a lot of folks just couldn't bear to drive by that every day. So some homeowners just chose to leave. Some still live on the south side of Indianapolis. Others have just moved out and keep in contact. There's a Facebook private page that the homeowners of Richmond Hill share amongst themselves. And so they keep in touch. It's a very tight-knit community. And so they still find ways to communicate with each other. Joanna Mill asks, when's her sentencing? Joanna is referring to Monserrate Shirley. Her sentencing will be when all the criminal cases are over. So we don't have a date on that. So it'll depend on what happens in the cases involving Gary Thompson and Glenn Hults. At the conclusion of that, then Judge Sheila Carlisle will make the determination whether she faces 0 to 50 years. The advisory sentence on this case would be 30 years. We want to just bring you up to date on what's been happening in Fort Wayne. We want to thank you for helping us lead the discussion, and hopefully we filled in some of the facts. We use Facebook Live often as reporters to just share some of the things we just can't fail during television. So if you have any more questions, feel free to join our conversation. We'll have much more throughout the day on the RTV6 app as well on Facebook. I'm Rafael Sanchez of the RTV6 Newsroom. Thank you so much. I'll keep reading your posts as they come in throughout the day, and hopefully I'll have many more answers for you as we continue this coverage of the Bob Leonard case. Thank you for watching.